Okay, April 25th, Saturday, April 25th, in your one-year reading, and I will, for those of you that are wishing I'd hurry it up a bit, I think we don't need to be as prolonged today. But we have another shift in Judges. So first of all, if you pick it up today, Judges 4:1 jumps from Ehud, and it skips over Shamgar. Shamgar is again not one of the major judges that's delineated in the text. Shamgar is just mentioned, so we have Ehud, and then we go from Ehud after Ehud's death. So Shamgar probably was active during the primary judgeship of Ehud. Okay, so after he dies, though, what happens after Ehud dies? Here we go again, back to the cycle. The Israelites again. This is explained to us in chapter 1. The Israelites again did evil in the Lord's sight, so the Lord turned them over to King Jabin of Hazor, a Canaanite king. And then he has kind of a mercenary lieutenant of his army, Sisera, who has who operates or is in charge of 900 iron chariots. So the idea is that this is the fact this army is technologically superior to Israel. Now, real quick, let me just say fast that chapter 4 and chapter 5 go together in the book of Judges. Chapter 4 is the prose, chapter 5 is the poetry. They both tell the same story. One does it via prose, one does it via poetry. And the poetic one actually has, in parts, some details that we don't know about in 4, which is kind of cool. But the star of the show, of course, is Deborah. This is a huge deal. I know that in the 21st century we think, maybe it's not a big deal, but it's a huge deal. There isn't yet a feminine hero in the text. We have no feminine heroic persons in the Pentateuch. You could argue maybe in Genesis we have some, and with Moses' mom and sister, but nobody like this. Nobody like just this stellar person. So you have we of course think it's great for them. It would have, unfortunately, sorry to say this out loud, for the community experiencing this and those reading it to see that Deborah is so important is actually a sign that things aren't great. Just don't be upset with that. At the time, that meant that things were so bad or weak that there wasn't a male. Where's the male? That society that would have been a male-driven, a very patristic society. So it would have been weird for them not to have a male in charge, and there wasn't one. Deborah's in charge, and she's not, now she's called a judge right now in the first part, but that doesn't mean that she's acting militarily yet. She's not a military leader, but she's judging them as a prophetess, she is prophesying, and not just, and now this is where we get an idea what is a prophet. She's not just saying she's not sitting under her palm tree predicting the future. She's there as a covenant caller, as an arbitrator, as people have concerns about what is right or what to do in relationship to the covenant. She is calling them back to covenant as people come to her with concerns or questions. She calls them back to covenant, and she does so under a charismatic gift. So the people of Israel, they're oppressed for 20 years. They cry out for help. This is the Lord stirs Deborah. She calls for Barak, whose name means lightning, and he is slow. And she says, you need to go and rouse the troops. And he's reluctant. He'll go, but only if she goes with him. And then she says, well, that's going to cost you honor. Your victory is going to go to another gal. So then you have the battle, and they're very victorious. This doesn't explain in 4 what happens with the chariots. We just know that Barak is he wins. But Sisera, the lieutenant, he escapes, thinking that he's going to be pals with one of the descendants of Moses' family, and he goes there. And Jael, the wife of Heber the Kenite, uh, she brings them in, and she offers him some basically curds and whey, some cottage cheese and milk, some stuff from a sack. They put liquids were usually contained in skins. So she gives him this delicious dish, this drink that she disarms him with great hospitality, and then covers him up and puts him down for a little bit of a nap, and then drives a tent peg through his head and leaves him there dead until Barak comes. I want you to notice, I didn't say this yesterday, notice in Judges the unique instruments and means by which the Lord uses people to gain victory. We had a specialized dagger and a specialized on the right hand by a left-handed guy that gets rammed through the guy's belly, and then his guts spill out. That's a little bit different. And now we have a tent peg. So we have a dagger and a tent peg used, and they're going to continue. Each of these judges, we're going to start seeing interesting mechanisms, and the more interesting the mechanism, I suppose we'll look at it and see what kind of historical and other kind of things. There's probably lots of layers of literary meaning there, but these aren't invented. These are actually happening, and so we would need to back up and say, look at how the Lord uses different people and different means, and even at increasingly necessarily so in other words, they have 900 iron chariots, and they lose to a housewife with a tent peg and a hammer. Come on, there's the message. How is that possible? Only if Yahweh is fighting for you. Now from there you should be able to take great comfort, great confidence that you don't need to measure the technology or the resources that you have. You need to trust in God. He can a sack of milk and a tent peg will save the day against 900 chariots. Now, if you fast forward, I want you to see something real quick. That in verse 15 it says, when Barak attacked, the Lord threw Sisera and all his chariots and warriors into a panic. We're going to figure out why that happened. But the idea there, I want you to just to see, or I think it's important for us always to see, that panic always precedes defeat. That panic is always the condition that will arise in our hearts. Panic always leads to defeat. Panic is never the option, the path toward victory. And so beware of panic. Beware of it. It's a temptation. We jump off. It's a fascinating psychological reflection of as to what panic is, but just know that it's deadly. You will always make the wrong decision in panic. Okay, so you go to chapter 5, and then you hear the song of Deborah, and the poetry sort of explains or gives more insight. And I want you to see a couple of things that your Bible it depends. There's a verse she basically says, listen, I'm going to tell you what happened. Here's the deal. Things were winding down. People didn't go out. People weren't going bad. Things were getting bad. She's giving the history. Things were getting bad, and then verse 8. Depending on your version, it might say God chose new rulers, because what it means is new rulers were chosen, or it's actually strong language, and the ESV, the NASB, and the NLT both say it this way: Israel chose new gods. It means new gods were chosen. So if the word is leaders, then it's like and new leaders were chosen, then we would say, aha, in the midst of leadership failure, God raised up new leaders, which He did in Deborah and Jael. So that's true. If that's the translation, that's true, and that works for us. And we say, yep, that's true. And not only is it true there, but we can recognize that it's probably true because it's across the horizon of redemptive history and biblical revelation. We see that God raises up new leaders, especially when the current or former leaders are failing. Saul, David, right? It's a pattern. But if it is translated verse 8, when Israel, or when the people, or when new gods were chosen, war erupted at the city gates. That also could be true, and either one of them are fine, but this is, hey, when they abandoned. Now this I think fits more in the thread of the book of Judges. New gods were chosen, meaning when they abandoned Yahweh and they chose Baal and Ashtoreth and all these other things, when new gods were chosen, war came to their gates. Now the other is an indicative story. This one is a warning. This is prescriptive. Hey, when our hearts are aligned or pursue idolatry, war comes. Spiritual warfare isn't always because someone's doing the right thing and the devil's after them. That does happen, of course. We know that does happen. But also be aware that war can come to the gate when the people of God choose new gods. That idolatry can invite attack. Be aware. But then, of course, then the rest of the story does these things. But also, you'll notice in here, bibbidi bop. Now, where did I see that? Oh, Newman. Down from the Tabor, the people marched. Down from Ephraim, Machar, most blessed, Gilead, Zebulun. Oh, Newman. Oh, here we go. Verse 21. The Kishon River swept them away, that ancient torrent, the Kishon. So the hint there in the Song of Deborah is what happened to them 900 chariots is that there was a storm occurred and the river overflowed, and like unto the Egyptian chariots, that 900 chariots became useless in the mud. That's what it looks like, that the Lord fought with them that way. Okay. There we go. There is also a strong rebuke in Deborah's song here against those who didn't come to help, who didn't participate in the war, who acted in fear. They're strongly rebuked as well. Okay, so then there's a final mockery of the. So we have Deborah and Jael being honored, and then but meanwhile the mother of Sisera over there. From the window, Sisera's mother looked out. Through the window, she watched for his return, saying, why is it taking him so long? And then everyone says, oh, don't worry, they're dividing the plunder, and they're taking two women for every one of our men, and they're saying, hey, Deborah's saying they're over there in their arrogance mocking, and what they find out is that they're totally devastated. But God has destroyed his enemies and elevated and honored the people who are favored. So here he says, Lord, may all your enemies be like Sisera, but may those who love you rise like the sun in all of its power. So this is a really cool act of poetry, a really cool thing to read. So take a look at that. Now, Luke 22 today, we're not doing too bad. Luke 22 today, Jesus is out there to pray with his boys, and he says, now, when I told you, he reminds them that the first time he sent them out, he told them not to take extra things, and they were fine. They're like, yep, Lord, you were fine. And then I like that. Look at here, Luke 22:35. When I sent you, did you need anything? And they say, no, Lord. Boom. That's always going to be true, okay? That's where we get the idea where God guides, God provides, okay? But now he says, take a money, a traveler's bag, take a couple of swords. He's telling them, he's preparing them that their lives are not going to be stationary, but their lives are about to become very much transitory. But they're going to become travelers. They're going to be sent ones, and so they're preparing for that. Now he kind of says, buy a sword, and that's a normal thing to carry if you're a traveler. The idea is you're going to be moving. So they're like, swords? Are we going to fight? And he's like, that's enough. You read that, right? Verse 38. Look, Lord, we have 2 swords. That's enough. That's not what I meant. I didn't mean we're going to fight. I just mean be prepared to travel. Okay, so then he tells them to pray. And I just want you to look really quick, because it's worth it for us to notice that of Luke's version of Jesus praying. He walked away about a stone's throw and knelt down, and Father, if you're willing, take this cup of suffering from me, yet not what I will. Verse 43, then an angel from heaven appeared and strengthened him. Verse 44, he prayed even more fervently, and he was in such agony of spirit that his sweat fell to the ground like great drops of blood. There's not a lot there for us to have the specifics on, but I want us to see that Jesus comes to a place in prayer, and that in prayer an angel from heaven is sent to minister to him, to strengthen and comfort him as he's praying. But also there's an idea there that the angel is almost participating is giving him aid so that he is able to pray even more fervently. And we don't know. So I was reading some of the notes here, whether this was 2 or 3 or 4 hours of such intense fervent prayer that his physical body begins to break down because of it. But that is possible because God is helping him. There's literally an angel helping him to pray. See, well, was that just being nice? No, friends. We have to believe that again, prayer is essential. Prayer is important. Prayer makes things happen. That all of that, what was about to happen, it was this time of prayer. It wasn't just meant to make Jesus feel better or to comfort his soul as he prepared for the cross. There was nothing comforting to his soul about the agony he was doing in the garden. And I just want to say quickly that what we have to recognize is that this is where it really was beginning. That in the Spirit, in prayer, he contended and engaged and fought and struggled and suffered even before he did so in the physical realm. And that somehow what he was doing there in the garden in those hours of prayer wasn't just, oh gosh, I hope I can get out of this, but it was wrestling with this cup. I believe he was drinking the cup. He began to drink that cup in the garden. And which is why he was able to, in the natural and the physical, drink from that cup with such grace and with such effectiveness and with such power, and why everything he did was successful, and he was able to endure it, because we can say, if I can say it colloquially, that the battle was already won in prayer, that the conflict was already met and overcome in prayer. Or we could, if you want to say, the conflict was prepared for perfectly or sufficiently in prayer. But regardless, this is what we see in the prayer life of Jesus. I closed my Bible, but I didn't want to do that yet. Let me just look real quick. Take a look at today's Psalms that you read. And they're really encouraging. Psalm 94 is powerful, encouraging stuff. This is this is the psalmist looking at injustice of evil, and specifically what he perceives as injustice of those in authority and how he responds. And but so be careful with this. Don't make this too political. But first of all, he says in verse 12, joyful or blessed are we don't have a button for that. Joyful or blessed are those you teach with you discipline, Lord, those you teach with your instructions. You give them relief from troubled times. The relief from troubled times comes in the discipline and the instruction, the teaching of the Lord. Until a pit is dug to capture the wicked. That means the wicked, those who practice evil doing, are going to fall into a pit of their own doing. But we, the people who the Lord disciplines, if we will listen to his discipline and to his teaching, we will find relief. We will be spared, relief, comforted, rescued from times of trouble. But those same times of trouble for those who are not listening to the Lord, those times of trouble will become for them a pit into which they fall. Oh boy, oh boy, oh boy. Listen, look at verse 19 though, really, will you? This is the one I'd love to leave you with today, 94:19. When doubts filled my mind, your comfort gave me renewed hope and cheer. Your Bible might say when anxiety weighed down within me, or anxiety. So the idea is doubt, question, anxiety, confusion, conflict. When all of that is in my mind, the Lord himself gives us comfort, and that comfort renews our joy, our hope, our cheer, our anticipation. Hope is a joyful anticipation of the future, and that is what the Lord's hope does for us. All right, may the Lord bless you and strengthen you guys today. Thanks for your patience. If you enjoy, keep reading this or share it with somebody. I've got nothing to gain from it, but I hope that we all have a lot to gain from enjoying the Word together. God bless you. May the Lord anoint you today. May he anoint you today to be pleasing to him and powerful for him.